Hello everyone and welcome. On behalf of Interior Health, we would like to recognize and acknowledge the traditional and unceded territory of the Silk Nation, where we live, learn, collaborate, and work together. Welcome to Research Week 2018. Today's presentation will be titled Clinical Research at UBC Okanagan, Highlights from the School of Exercise Sciences and the Southern Medical Program Chronic Disease Prevention Program. Today's presenters are Kathleen A. Martin-Guinness and Robert Shea. Kathleen and Rob.
Hey, I'd just like to start by thanking everyone for the invitation to come and speak at the Research Week. Kathleen and I are going to present a series of slides which will introduce the School of Health and Exercise Sciences from UBC and the Chronic Disease Prevention Program. Our hope here is to really introduce ourselves and try and start to build some collaborations and build relationships between ourselves and IH. So hopefully all the slides are coming through and you can see them clearly. So as I've just said, I'm hoping that we can introduce the school and foster a greater communication and potential collaboration between colleagues at UBC and IH. I joined UBC in January, and since I arrived, I've got to know a number of my colleagues and the work they've been trying to do with IH over the last few years. A lot of individual relationships, but I'm hoping we can build beyond those and get to a point where the institutions really work closely together to create some ideas for research. So hopefully today is part of that process. Within the presentation, there's a lot of email addresses, and we've got some handouts for further contact details. So if you want to get in touch with us for any reason, please do so and use those email addresses. So if you've got a research project that you're keen to investigate and think that there's expertise at UBC, please reach out to us. If you just simply like to get involved with some of the studies, again, drop us a line and hopefully we can have some sensible conversation. If you're just interested in what we're doing and we mentioned something that might be relevant to you, again, just reach out. And also, if you're caring for patients and you think that they may be interested in the work we're doing, please also link us in as and when you see it appropriate. So that's hopefully what we'll cover today. So the mission of the School of Health and Exercise Science is to optimize human health from the individual to the population through excellence in teaching, research, and community engagement. Certainly since I've arrived, I'm really trying to push these three pillars of the work we do at UBC. Teaching is absolutely critical, and we're actually going through a review of the teaching that we're doing at the moment, and I'll touch on that briefly in a minute. The research is grown dramatically since the start of the school. We now have 22 faculty members, and I'll show you some stats around the research that's been completed there to give you a sense of the scale of what we're dealing with up at UBC. And really importantly for us is the community engagement piece. A lot of our students go out and work in the community, learn their skills, and to become for purpose, really. And we really want to improve that, and so this is part of why we're here today as well, to build those links to help our students learn the skills they need. Some overall statistics. The School of Exercise Sciences at UBC is ranked #1 in Canada and #4 in the world for the study of health and exercise sciences. Really are an institution that are proud of what we do in this area and can make a difference. We've got 22 research faculty and instructors. I'm really pleased that UBC recognizes both researchers and individuals who are specialists in teaching. We've got two great strands there that come together for the research, but also for the undergraduate and postgraduate programs. The number's grown quite significantly, and we're close to 800 undergraduate students studying in streams related to clinical exercise physiology and health promotion. I don't think that we're going to grow much beyond that. I certainly don't want us to, but we're drawing students from all over BC, but wider, and we're also growing quite we're trying to develop our international presence from an undergraduate perspective as well. We've got nearly 60 graduate students registered for research degrees, and this year we switched from masters to PhD level, so we have more PhD students now than we have masters. So that's very much growing in the right direction. We have 55 separately funded research projects at this moment in time. Some of our faculty hold externally funded research chairs, through the CRC or Michael Smith Foundation. The latest data that we've got is from 16-17, and in that year we generated $2.8 million in research funding and published 171 publications from a faculty of 22. I think pretty well, and I'm really proud to be part of that. And I really hope that these kind of conversations that we're having at the moment, our table right here, allows us to really develop the basis that we've built up at UBC and get really into the community and work with colleagues at IH to do that. In terms of the vision that we have for research in health and exercise sciences, we have expertise from the bench right the way through to the population. So we have people who are interested in science, looking down the microscope through to looking at huge populations. And that's real strength for what we have. But the piece that I'm really interested in is growing the population side of things and taking our work from the more controlled environment of the lab out into the field. And I'm hoping that that's part of why we're here today. But I'm going to touch briefly on some individuals that we have. This slide gives you an idea of the number of individuals we have and the specific labs and the centres. Many of those labs and centres have their own websites, so please go to the UB site and have a look around. But ultimately, we broadly fall into three specific areas of research interest. One of those is behaviour change, and Kathleen is on that area, and we'll talk to that in a little while. Another area that we're pretty strong on is neuromuscular physiology, and the other one is cardiorespiratory physiology. Those are three broad areas. There's a couple of people who sit between. We have a couple of lone scholars, but if you were to paint three buckets and drop us into them, it would largely be these three areas. So I'm going to pick up the first two areas before handing on to Kathleen, who'll take on the behaviour change side of things and also introduce the chronic disease prevention program. In the neuromuscular physiology group, from left to right, we have Anne Jacoby, Chris McNeil, Brian Dalton, and Paul Van Donkler. They all have their own individual labs. We're working at the moment to co-locate those labs to build a greater resource for this group of individuals. But it starts off with Jen. Jen's very interested in aging and looking at neuromuscular biomarkers for the early identification of functional decline. So she uses ultrasound, she uses EMG, and tries to look at functional deficits with aging and indeed other patient populations. A big interest of Jen's is sex differences and looking at how males and females age differently and how that might indeed interact with some clinical populations as well. Jen's also just taken on a large STEM role and so promotes science, especially within young girls at schools, to build that program as well. He's more of the bench side scientist in this area, but his work certainly informs recommendations for physical activity in certain patient populations. But really interested in the plasticity of the neuromuscular system. So how that neuromuscular system can be changed with different types of exercise training, and how exercise training interacts with different populations to try and mitigate the loss that we see in different populations, whether that be in injury or disease or elderly populations. Brian, sits somewhere in between, so he's very interested in the aging side of things as well, but now applying it to, with respect to falls and balance. So he does a lot of work with a balance setup that he has in his laboratory and how individuals with different impairments or age groups, their balance starts to fail, and how we can understand that from a neuromuscular perspective. The individual in this group is Paul Van Donkler. Paul was actually in my chair for a while, so he's now stepped down from that and is really trying to get research up and running again. But he transitioned his area of interest in traumatic brain injury from contact sports in athletes to intimate partner violence, and he has a large program of research growing there at the moment. He already has a lot of links in the community, but that program's something that's really of interest to us at the moment. So, in the cerebrovascular perspective, so how traumatic brain injury impacts on the vascular blood flow regulation, but also how that neurocognition. So that's four areas. So those individuals work together across the spectrum, from a very basic science perspective through to working out in the community with individuals. So if these are interests are sort of running with anyone who's listening, please feel free to get in touch. So move on to the cardiorespiratory physiology group, the group that I'm closest to. My area of interest sits within this field. We have the Centre for Heart, Lung and Vascular Health, which has been running up at UBC for a number of years. So on the top line we have Phil Ainsley, Bill Eves, and then Glenn Foster, and then at the bottom we've got Ali McManus, John Little, and then myself. Now, Ali and John probably sit really squarely in here, but this is probably the close area that their recent interests align with. He's a full professor with us and is a CRC chair. He's interested in cerebral blood flow control and regulation. So again, if we think of the bench to bedside side of things, Phil is probably more on the left-hand side of things. He's very much interested in the mechanistic approach, but then also how that applies to certain special populations to try and understand how cerebrovascular blood flow is controlled and regulated. He spends a lot of time overseas at high altitude, trying to understand the mechanisms of hypoxia, both normobaric and hyperbaric hypoxia, and how that influences brain blood flow. So there's clear overlap here towards patient populations as well, and he has done some work with patient populations in the past. Glenn Foster, similar to Phil, is more on the mechanistic side, but his work from a patient perspective steps into the sleep apnea world and is very interested in the influence of sleep apnea on cardiovascular disease. So those individuals with sleep apnea obviously have a higher prevalence of cardiovascular disease, and he's interested in the chemoreflex and the sympathetic neurovascular transduction that is involved or that become deregulated through sleep apnea. Neil's trained as a respiratory physiologist, and while is his training, more recently he's been stepped into the cardiovascular world and is particularly interested in heart-lung interaction. And from within this group is probably one individual who's closest to population type work. He does a lot of work down here and is interested in the role of exercise and specific exercise intervention in populations. Does a lot of work with COPD and is very interested in developing that. I mean, one of the projects he's currently looking at is, there's a big push for HIIT type training at the moment, HIIT exercise training. So he's interested in comparing that with a more tailored approach to exercise intervention. Often exercise prescription, research perspective, is got something new that might be HIIT, and we'll compare it to moderate intensity training. And actually, is moderate intensity training, I know a lot of we do it and prescribe it, but actually look through maybe the elite athlete model, that isn't what gets you the best adaptations. So he's really interested in trying to understand how you can manipulate the training impulse for the best results from a COPD perspective. Ali is very interested in in pediatric physiology. She trained as a pediatric physiologist back in Exeter in the UK, then spent a lot of time over in Hong Kong, but has done a lot of work examining the impact of sedentary behavior on health in pediatric populations. And a fair amount of work looking at screen time and increasing screen time, what that does if your child and you're sat 4, 5, 6, 7 hours at a time, playing on a console, what's doing to the vasculature. So a lot of work she's doing at the moment is trying to build in physical activity breaks into that behavior and trying to break that behavior. She's done a fair amount of work with local schools, but is really keen to develop that work. So fits nicely with the mandate, I'm sure, that we're around this table. Joel, who's currently running a research day of his own related to diabetes back up at UBC. John is very interested in diabetes and trying to reverse diabetes through lifestyle interventions, whether that be specific diets. So paper on ketogenic diets, really important for the diabetic population. But he's got a long history of looking at different types of exercise training. So again, has done a fair amount of work in the HIIT world, but is interested in combining exercise interventions that are tailored to the individual alongside specific tailored dietary interventions. So to move away from generic guidelines to a tailored approach for individuals. So that's John's area. If I'm not on the director roles, I try and remember that I'm a researcher, and my background is in exercise-induced cardiac remodeling. So different exercise interventions bring about adaptation, specifically in the heart, but also in the vasculature to some degree. My background was in elite performance, so I was interested in the training end of it. But over the last 5, 6 years, very much more interested in what we're doing in cardiac rehabilitation. Again, looking at specific tailoring of exercise intervention to get the best adaptations that we can possibly get. The other thing that I'm interested in is a comparative cardiovascular physiology. So how have we as humans, our cardiovascular system evolved? And does that explain why humans are so susceptible to cardiovascular disease? So trying to really understand why this suite of diseases are so problematic for us. So that was those areas. I'm now going to pass over to Kathleen, who's going to pick up on the behavior change side of things and the chronic disease prevention program.
Rob, and good morning. Martin Guinness, and as you'll hear in a moment, I do wear a couple of hats. So I'm first going to speak wearing my hat as a professor in the School of Health and Exercise Sciences and the representative for our behavior change group. Airing on the theme that Rob mentioned of bench-to-bedside approaches to research in the School of Health and Exercise Sciences, when we think about our behavior change work, I think our bench-to-bedside model can really best be conceptualized as theoretical to applied research. So on the theoretical side, we spend a lot of time trying to understand mechanisms by which we can change people's health-related behaviors, looking at theory-based models that explain physical activity, nutrition, and other health-related behaviors with the goal of ultimately intervening to change those behaviors. And on the applied side, we are truly a community-engaged group. We take a lot of pride in using integrated knowledge translation frameworks to develop not just our research questions, but right back to the grant writing process, all the way through to the research question development, developing the project, analyzing the data, and then the dissemination and hopefully the implementation of the results into the communities and into the hands of people who can use those results. Heather Gainforth is a true implementation scientist. Her focus is on knowledge translation and behavior change, and she came to us from Susan Mickey's Applied Behavior Change Lab in the UK following a postdoc. So Heather's primary focus, you can see, around KT and IKT. She's working I'll flip to the next slide. She's spending a lot of time right now trying to develop standardized principles for IKT and community-engaged research processes. Her primary research community that she works with is the spinal cord injury community. That the principles that she's developing in that community are going to have implications for a wide range of communities and organizations that we work with within our school and beyond. She's very interested in understanding the therapeutic alliance. So given her background with Mickey's lab and in applied behavior change, she's very interested in looking at a very granular level, what happens between interactions between a healthcare provider and a patient, between mentors, what are the key ingredients in those conversations and in those relationships that lead to health-related behavior change and other types of change as well. Mary Jung is an associate professor in our school, and alongside Dr. John Little, she's very interested in diabetes and diabetes prevention. She's also truly invested in health behavior change, understanding both the basic principles of behavior change, but applying them to design, implement, and evaluate evidence-based strategies to improve diet and physical activity in people at risk for type 2 diabetes. I'm familiar with Mary's Small Step for Big Changes program, which happens coincidentally right on the ground floor of the building we're in right now at the YMCA. If you have any patients or if you know of people who might be interested in participating in this program for people who are pre-diabetic, I really encourage you to reach out. It's been a tremendously successful program, and Mary and her team are always looking for new participants. So this is, I'm a full professor, and my primary research interest, or the community that I work primarily with, is people who have sustained spinal cord injuries. So I'm interested in studying the health and psychosocial benefits of physical activity and how to develop physical activity behavior change interventions for this population. My other key interest is ensuring that any type of health-related research gets put into the hands of people who can use it in the community, whether that's people living with SCI, healthcare providers, caregivers, and so on. You can read more about our research, and we've developed a wide range of knowledge translation products, primarily around physical activity promotion for people with SCI, and they're available on my lab's website. Hats a little bit here. I also wear the hat of being the director of the Chronic Disease Prevention Program in the Southern Medical Program. So I'm 7% appointed in the Faculty of Medicine in the Department of Medicine, Division of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation. And in last year, almost exactly a year ago now, the Chronic Disease Prevention Program was launched as the research arm of the Southern Medical Program at UBC Okanagan. The Wright family established an endowed chair to accelerate the development of an academic research program that really aspires to develop and implement innovations to improve the health of people living in the Okanagan and beyond. And I'm very honored to serve as the inaugural Reichwald Family Chair in the Chronic Disease Program, and as well as to serve as the director of the program. Role for about a year now, and I'm in the process of transitioning us from a program to a center, which I think better reflects our structure and some of our aspirations. So that gives you a sense of some of the areas that we've identified as we start getting up and running. These are some of the areas that we've identified as potential areas of expertise and areas of interest for research and knowledge translation. So diabetes and obesity, cardiovascular and cardiopulmonary diseases, and neurological disorders. And the thread that runs across all of these is that, again, we're very much interested in ensuring that we're conducting research that is translatable and has the potential to be implemented into the community around the prevention and management of these conditions. Have underneath medical care, knowledge, skills, health behaviors, and resources. That might look familiar. I did borrow that from the IH website. But I think it's very well put. When we talk about the management of the conditions, this is exactly the type of work that we are targeting, that we are keen on doing. We have the resources to make 6 FTE hires over the next 5 years within the Chronic Disease Prevention Program, or soon to be hopefully a center. And those hires will be a combination of both research professors as well as clinician scientists. At this point, we have made 2 hires, and I'd like to introduce those hires to you now. So first is Dr. Chris West, and his primary research interest is in spinal cord injury and cardiovascular health. Dr. West is a cardiovascular exercise physiologist who came to us from UBC Vancouver. He's also a Michael Smith scholar, and his primary interests are in understanding how the heart changes after SCI, lower limb exercise strategies, and habitual physical activity levels in people with SCI. Dr. West is a rather unique scientist insofar he truly works across the translational spectrum. Much of his work is done in rat models. He also works with elite athletes with spinal cord injury, and he and I have also collaborated on some behavior change trials out in the community, looking at increasing physical activity in community-dwelling people with SCI. Our hire is Brody Sakibara, and Brody started on September 1st. He came to us as a postdoc from Simon Fraser University. His primary research interest looks at the stroke population, and his two areas, he has a focus in the clinical area, which is around chronic disease self-management and secondary prevention following stroke, and e-health for the delivery of chronic care supports and services. One thing I forgot to mention around backtracking a bit now, but back with Behavior Change Group, is in mid-November we will be opening a new research lab facility on the UBC campus, and hoping to establish that as a Center for Health Behavior Change. We're very excited that with Dr. Young, Dr. Gainforth, and myself all working under one roof, this gives us the opportunity to really collaborate and work together on new theory-based behavior change interventions in the area of physical activity and nutrition. A characteristic of this facility is that this 2,400 square foot facility will have both an adapted exercise training facility, that's a reflection of the work that we do in spinal cord injury, and also an adapted kitchen facility. And that's reflective as well as the work that Young does in nutrition, and also facilities as well for Dr. Gainforth to be analyzing the behavior change, the therapeutic alliance relationships at that granular level that I mentioned to you. Wanted to highlight that we see our chronic disease prevention program is truly being a partnered research endeavor. I've listed just a few of the partners and collaborators that we're working with. And to echo Rob's sentiments, I'm really hoping that what we take forth from today's presentation is identification of new opportunities for collaboration and, in fact, further strengthening some of the relationships that we already have. I think that's our slide presentation, and I'll hand it back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you both, Kathleen and Rob, for that great presentation. It's really exciting to see the evolution, the growth that's been made. Also, we had the honor of meeting Brody yesterday, actually. He came for some of our sessions. Yeah, and he's wonderful. Are there any questions online or in the room at this time? I've opened the chat box as well, so please feel free to type questions in there, or you can unmute your line and ask away. Both Kathleen and Rob would be more than happy to answer any questions that you have.
I'll pose a question from here in the room. It's Wendy Papillion. I'm a regional practice lead with the research department here at Interior Health. Impressive to see a summary of some of the researchers and the research that they're doing at UBC Okanagan, because I've actually interacted with a number of these people the last 2 years when I worked in the research ethics office and ethics board for Interior Health. So I know a number of these professors already by name or by email, but it's impressive to see their faces and also to hear more about the research foci. I know that some of them, and certainly some of them that have been here longer, like Dr. Eves and Dr. Ainsley, have made connections and relationships with some of the physicians and physician specialists that we have in the Interior Health region. But I'm just wondering how that part of relationships happens, because Interior Health Research Department, and I know that those of you here in the room have certainly met Dr. Yvonne Lefebvre and Dr. D. Taylor, and I'm sure probably also met Agnes Sakas, our VP. So I think we find more and better ways to connect and develop partnerships and relationships through our department in different sections and sectors in Interior Health and different, clinicians, physicians, etc. So I think after listening to this presentation, I have a number of ideas in my mind as to how we can start making some more connections. But obviously, a key piece for a lot of the types of research you do are also connections and relationships with individual physicians, family physicians, special physicians. Again, they're all credentialed with Interior Health if they work within our health authority and region, but they also obviously are all independent practitioners. And I'm just wondering how if there's a particular avenue that you go through to try to with them, or if there's avenues that work kind of, I'm just wondering how the relationship working at that level, because to me that's a key piece of this, and then I have some thoughts going on around how we can, almost like, to me, a bit of a triad. So you've got the UBC faculty researchers, you've got Interior Health as the health authority and the health authority players and clinicians. And you've got physicians who are often connected to both, because a lot of physicians also have academic appointments, but they're not directly IH employees. Some of them are, but most of them are not. So to me, it's kind of like a triad of players that are the stakeholders here. Of course, then we've got all the community agencies, funders, everybody else around us. But how does that piece work for you? You go first.
Okay. A number of conversations recently, no one has articulated the situation better than what you've just explained.
Oh, yes. Wow.
And so I've had numerous conversations with colleagues up at UBC. So you've made this relationship work. How are we able to try and take that and grow it? At the moment, the way I see it is that individuals hold individual relationships. They've knocked doors, they've had cups of coffee, they've put the long hours to build those individual relationships. And so some projects are being supported by those kind of relationships. But I see much beyond that at this moment in time. I think it would be really, really good if we can start to have the conversation about how we bring those three parties together to really leverage what we have here, because I think there's an incredible opportunity. But at the moment, certainly within health and exercise sciences, relationships have been based on individual level conversation. Yeah.
Because I certainly know that strangely, Dr. E. has full treatment in Interior Health for a long time.
Absolutely.
I'm in a fortunate situation being located in the Southern Medical Program. We're just getting things off the ground, but by virtue of being in the medical program and there being such strong relationships established, we've been putting the call out at this point. We've also had some support from some key players as well to try to direct us to people who might be interested. But as Rob said, we've had lots of conversations about how to do this strategically, and you've positioned it so well that I think there needs to be, in general, a much clearer pathway rather than individually knocking on doors or just us shouting out who wants to get involved.
Because unfortunately, I mean, certainly the one-to-one relationships are always important. One-to-one relationships are always important, but they just take so much time and energy and effort. Any given physician, professor, clinician, if you have to do everything on one-on-one relationships, emails, conversations, phone calls, meetings, it's just a huge drain of energy and time resources that are also precious to all of those parties. Forgive me, I didn't have my mic on sooner, but my voice usually carries fairly well. I don't know if we have any of our physician stakeholders line today listening to this presentation, but I have just avenues through like the Interior Health Medicine and Quality Portfolio. Vice President currently Dr. Mike Ertel, who certainly holds a lot of interest and experience in research. I'm sure you know Devin Harris as well in his previous role as Associate Director for Research. But I'm also just thinking of other layers within the physician community and how those two gentlemen might help us present some conversations, I'll say, like through the divisions of family practice, through the primary care networks that are now starting up, through grand round sessions, through, there's lots of avenues where these different physicians and physician groups certainly come together. Yeah. And I think we have such a wealth of physicians with so much practice, experience, knowledge, patient-people contact to contribute to the research happening at UCO. It would be really nice if we could find some avenues that would leverage those connections and relationships a little bit easier, a little bit quicker for everybody. Another piece I'll just comment on, unless we have questions in the chat box.
Not yet.
We've had some presentations this week from patients and patient partners. I think you're aware, but maybe not. Bro is because he attended our sessions. The days are blurring together. I think it was
yesterday,
Wednesday.
Sure. Yeah.
So we have a patient engagement in research committee now for interior health. The currently has 7 members. 2 of them provide the most provoking and inspiring on how patients can be truly engaged in research. Some of the barriers, some of the obstacles, some of the challenges, some education issues that they see from a patient perspective when engaging in research, both either as a research team member or as a participant. But certainly shone a light on how we can use that committee, and I think, again, the expertise of the people in that committee, and anyone, they all have their networks and connections and people that they know and groups that they're involved with. So I think, again, as we're aware, the push on patient-oriented research and getting patients more involved in research and all of the research you've described, I mean, that's a key piece. So I think, again, too, if we can leverage that opportunity more, our peer committee has been up and running for 2 years. Taken some time to kind of form norms. I always call it when you pull a new group of people together with a new purpose. It takes a while to figure out who they are, what they are, and what they're there to do. They've done that. They're certainly contributing to infrastructure and background for research in interior health in big ways now, the most recently being a full consultation that they did on our research strategy moving forward and providing a number of excellent recommendations on how patients can be engaged. So I'm thinking we could certainly leverage some relationship there as well, because they're keen and ready to be involved as patient partners in research projects, whether they're reviewing them, whether they're adding a patient perspective to a recruitment piece, whether you've got a researcher who's needing a patient partner on a project longer term. They're keen and excited and ready to do that kind of work. So I'm not sure actions we've had to date. I think, again, through the research department and Carl, our patient engagement lead, we can certainly set up a presentation like this with their group and maybe bring the conversation a little bit more to a different level where it focuses a bit more on that piece of the relationship and how it can work. I mentioned them in the original triad, but really they're the middle of the triad. Yeah. I mean, they're the reason we're all here and doing the work. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But we've got lots of different avenues we need to start. Forget who's all online, but I've been one to say things broadly for. It's time we just start sticking our nose in, pushing the envelope a little bit. Interior health has taken a while to get established as a research, welcoming and research culture institution, but we're getting there. We're certainly in a much different place than we were even 5 years ago. So I think kind of what we're seeing now and what we're hearing is than where we thought we'd be at this point, and I think we're certainly ready and positioned with the next research strategy to help these relationships grow.
That's really positive.
Yeah.
So are you writing a new research strategy?
Our strategy is actually being written and authored by the 2 directors of research, Dr. Yvonne Lefebvre as the scientific director and Dr. Dee Taylor as the corporate director. They actually just presented on the research strategy yesterday. It is not finalized yet. It is going to the IH Board Strategic Priorities Committee on Monday, along with the VP Research there. The 3 of them will present. The board has been, the board of directors and under our new board chair, Dr. Cochran, they've been very interested in what's happening with research and where we're looking to go with research in interior health. So it'll be interesting to see how the strategy conversation goes on Monday and where things go from there.
It was really encouraging. A couple of weeks ago, we had a Michael Smith Foundation celebration up at UBC, and there was a number of people. There was some really good conversation around what we're talking about here.
Right.
In terms of how we start to pull those different pillars together. bizarrely, I think the short geographic distance between UBC and us makes an issue, and it shouldn't be, but I think it historically has been. So any way we can improve our presence here to, you mentioned Grand Rounds, that kind of thing, to just help the discussion along. I think if there's anything like that we can do, we should bring the groups together.
When we definitely, I can speak to that for our lunch and learns and we also have a research network meeting bi-monthly, and we always ask presenters to come for the research network meetings, which are open to everybody for the presentation itself, and then they're welcome to stay for the network meeting itself. And then our lunch and learns are just as requested states. So it can be 3 times a month, or they can wait a couple months and then come again. And I know that I believe that we've had Mary present with us before. We have, yes. And I know I've met Mary a couple of times, and she's lovely. And her work is exemplary. So if there's an opportunity for that, I would be the primary contact for that. Would be more than able to.
If you were keen on speakers, please reach out.
Absolutely, yes.
We can.
That would be another very great place to do this presentation is for our research network across the whole region.
The work that's happening and for who's who in the zoo is right? Who's who in the zoo? So and UBC is in different zoos. That's how we can all connect together, right? I know it's a layman way to put it, but it's true.
It is.
And it's very it's complex when you're outside looking in, but when you're in, it's your everyday life. So and that's my role here as well. I'm sorry, I should say who I am. I'm Kim, speaking on to those connecting. So I'm a good connect here of being able to connect with you. Yeah. Okay, great. Are there any questions online? Any in the chat box at this time? So if you don't feel like speaking, it's okay. You can do in the chat box, or we can post the slide later and you can listen to it. I'm always connected to Kathleen or Rob later on too. On that note, hearing nothing, I will say a big thank you to Kathleen and Rob for coming today and presenting with us for IH Research Week 2018. Thank you for everybody joining us online, and for those that were having technical issues, there was a lady calling in from Brazil. Thank you for attempting, and we hope to share the link later on with you. Thank you to everybody in the room, and have a wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.